Hi, Nick Tuckert here with the Historical Fencing Guild. This is the fourth in the Supernatural Defense series, pardon my camera adjustment, and today we're going to be talking about spirits. We Every video has transitioned a bit from the last. So, when we went from vampires to werewolves, and there was a bit of overlap there in some of the medical beliefs, as well as the element of transmittable foreign possession. Then we went from the werewolves to the fae, which seems like a big jump until you realize the more natural overlap, environmental concerns, they transition well. Well, now we're transitioning from the fae, which are not to be messed with, to the spirits, which it seems like a whole bunch of idiots mess with. And that's not nice. That's not nice. But this time of year especially, people go out and they want to scare, so they poke stuff. And what they fail to realize is hauntings and spirits and all this business. We'll get into the whole ghost phenomenon. Doesn't just stop when it's convenient, okay? If you want to be spooked, go out and go to a haunted house. Have guys in costumes jump out at you in unexpected ways. Get spooked, enjoy it, and then leave it there. Don't go messing with ghosts. That being said, we got a breakdown, because I'm using spirits, I'm using ghosts, I'm using a lot of terms already floating around. And let's break down ghosts into easy digestive chunks before we get how to deal with them. You have three classes, basically, of spirit, ghost, whatever. You have your repeaters, you have your intelligence, and you have your inhumans. Now, repeaters are both, ironically, some of the hardest to deal with and the easiest to tolerate. A repeater is basically a recording. You'll find them in places and situations where repetitive motion with a lot of emotional energy behind it, a lot of care, kind of weave around. Very often you'll find repeaters in also associated with places with a lot of metal. I have a kind of half-written theory about how metal acts like a battery, essentially, and the emotional energies that are around it tends to hold. This is why when you go through the hierarchy of haunted places, one of the interconnecting threads is a vast quantity of metal, and oddly, usually coupled with confinement. It's a level of threshold that you don't find anywhere else. So this is schools, this is hospitals, this is jails, and this is lighthouses. Anywhere where someone is very rigidly defined, this is their area. And there is a lot of metal, and there's a lot of emotional tie to being in that area. Usually a sense of being trapped. Which, realistically, there's not a kid who goes to school who, one point or another, doesn't feel trapped there. They may enjoy the process. I love teachers. I used to be a paraprofessional myself. But let's be honest, a school is very much, a prison for children, as said by the great sage Winifred Sanderson, not Sanford. Uh, wow, now I'm just seeing, Binks, I'm coming to you. Anyway, sorry, dead air. The thing about repeaters is they're just that. They are sort of recording usually of an incident or an action that goes on over and over. And they've basically like magnetized the usually the metal around them to just store this information and re-release it, just like any magnetic data, floppy disks, things like that. For you younger people, that's what the save icon is based on. We used to store things magnetically. That being said, what do you do about a repeater? Well, repeaters are of an interesting sort in that they aren't real. There's no sentience. It's simply something that happens at the same time, all the time. You can't interact with that loop. You can observe, you can ignore, or you can try to break essentially the recording device. This is why, you have people who will bless a house in hopes that'll do it. Ironically, because there's not a lot of negative energy, and it's just a sort of staticky mirage, a blessing really doesn't do a lot for repeaters because there's not really anything opposing it. It's just a supernatural, almost mechanical device. This is where salt baths work better, or when we get a little farther on, I'm going to talk to attached objects. I don't want to use the word cursed, but cursed applies. The problem being sometimes the attached object or the cursed object is either an entire building, or it may just be the banister that entity, the person who originally programmed this, touched every time they walked by as they were thinking about the dread of whatever. Um, it it's almost like the repeaters are a result of a protocasting. If you look into the mechanics of how magic is alleged to work, and I say alleged because Anyway, it so what you have is somebody has turned either the building or a piece of the building into a emotional storage dump, and that emotional storage becomes keyed with when they applied it to release it. That's why you have they say on the night of her death you can hear her run screaming down the hall and the door slams. It's interesting because sometimes the door does indeed slam, which normally may require a very powerful human spirit or a very powerful inhuman spirit. Now, that being said, there isn't much to do about a repeater. You recognize it for what it is, and just realize it's as natural an entity as having a foggy day down by the creek. It may be spooky, watching the fog roll across, but after the 200th time, you just expect, oh, that's the fog rolling across. And the paranormal then becomes just part of your normal. You'll find that a lot with haunted houses, and we'll get into that after the categories. The second is a intelligent haunt. This is kind of the granddaddy of what most so-called ghost hunters want. That's the evidence that people are really hungry for, because it has ties to life after death. The hope being you could actually get the conversation to ask them and follow. But you'll find most ghost hunters who allegedly make contact are not very adept at doing anything with that contact. In that it's is someone here? Yeah, knock 3 times if you can hear me. Knock, knock, knock. Okay, can you do it again? Wow, I'm scared. Okay, you're starting to make contact. You're starting to make the potential for discussion, but they don't, and that has always bothered me. Um, Spirits, and when I say spirits, usually I'm referring to this middle class of ghosts. This is the sentient ghost. This is the one that usually has ties the spirit seems tied to the place and unwilling or unable to move on, usually associating with a trauma. Somebody died in the house. Somebody was a killer in the house. somebody was tormented in the house. Now, a repeater can happen when bad things happen. You can get a sentient that moves like a repeater, where there will be more than just repeated actions, but they're tied to a location. Or, in interesting overlap, you can have the ghost of a traumatic experience that interacts, but is a copy of someone who isn't dead. Also, with repeaters, there have been cases of situations where someone who's lived to, especially to an old age, has gone back to a place where they had trauma and they've actually seen repeaters of themselves, um, to a sliding scale of quasi sentience. So it is possible, and I have studied cases where someone had to essentially lay their own ghost. It's a really bizarre piece of logic. It's one of those where when you realize it's a possibility, it changes the game quite a bit, and it really makes most most ghosts feel and look once they and after debunking. And I will get into debunking again. Well, I will later, but the idea that it's not necessarily a trapped spirit, but it's more of a casting that's done unconsciously. It implies, uh, a bit more of the unceremonial magical systems that may exist in the world. It's fascinating stuff. Now we're getting into the field approaching high strangeness, which is one of those things that it's always fun to discuss. But once we get past all this, these are the ones that talk back. These are the ones that respond. These are the ghosts who usually have to draw in energy from other sources. So they're the ones who are going to drain your batteries, flicker the lights. Obviously, most common, drop the temperature in a room, pulling the energy to manifest from the surrounding areas. Again, it's a very casting like mechanical process. The energy comes in, it takes a form, and it is made manifest. Fascinating stuff. People don't really talk much about the nuts and bolts mechanics of hauntings, but these are very often I found to be attached to to an item almost more often than a place. I wonder how many haunted houses are actually haunted because they're not haunted. The thing is tied to a doorknob or a mirror. I definitely have encountered one case where there was a ghost in a mirror, but that's fun. The but it's still fairly limited to human capacity. The amounts of tricks it can do are limited. Then you get into inhuman spirits. Now, some people say inhuman spirits uh, are just demons, and I don't use that term very often. I don't like it, so you'll hear me say things like the sulfur crowd. I don't like messing with them. I have a lot of this is what do you believe in, what do you think, and then there's what do you know exists. I don't have to have faith. I have absolute knowledge that the sulfur crowd exists. They're diabolically evil. That wasn't an intended pun, but the most accurate description, and not to be trifled with. Um, but under that, we get things that wash possibly in and out. This is where you get shadow creatures, uh, the Hat Man phenomenon. Uh, the Wild Hunt, and I told you this would overlap, has been associated both with demonic forces, undead forces, and actually fey or elvish forces. It is something that mutates to fit the accepted mythology of the area, but retains the same format of there's a huntsman, there are large, powerful hunting dogs. They are black. They usually have red burning eyes, usually about twice to three times the size of a normal large dog. So you're looking at something in the 200 to 300 pound range. Huge, powerful beasts, led with a, if not evil, certainly malicious intent. Well, a single minded focus to hunt down someone or something, and you don't want to be out during it. Also, there's a bit of myth of conversion. The mechanics necessary for hunting requires an intelligence, but the abilities are beyond that of a normal human phenomenon. So it's fascinating. This is where I said supernatural overlap is an interesting thing. That's why we go back and forth. Um, the big D's obviously have ties to religious texts. These are the guys you call, I'm going to say you call the Catholics on. And a lot of people give me flack about, you can call any religious authority, but they, to the best of my knowledge, in Western culture, they've been dealing with it the longest and the hardest, and they're most specialized. Uh, you don't want to mess with this sort of thing singularly. You just don't. Um, that's where you get into things like oppression and possession, which can, by some very powerful human spirits, supposedly, go, uh, but definitely the others. Now, we get some entities under the spirit realm that are much more animalistic and, again, overlap. So things like Wendigos. Wendigos seem to be in two varieties. There's almost the cryptid Wendigo, which is the entity that people see that has the sunken, rotting husk of a giant, almost deer-like creature with a skull, a deer skull and antlers, very distinct. Oh, versus the unseen spirit that laughs and calls people into the night, and it torments them and then picks them up and drags them away, oftentimes wearing off their feet by the friction of them being dragged. I mean, when you get into the old folklore, they're hardcore, but they're also quasi-intangible. Many of the more interesting things either start out here or kind of circle back to the more spiritual, more ghostly realm. Uh, I really can't state enough how stupid it is to mess with this stuff. And I have a personal bit of annoyance with the ghost hunters who approach it with they want to get evidence. Okay. But it seems like there's nothing beyond that in many cases. So they'll prove something's going on, but really not actively try to do anything about it. And, we're to get into that with the fighting of spirits, etc., which comes a little later. Uh, because what happens, I have found in the situations I've looked into, when the ghost hunters come, they come out and they set their cameras up and they record, and it's all very scientific, and I respect that, and I enjoy watching the shows, trying to find what's wrong, etc. But then they leave. You know what I'm saying? It's a bit like saying, I have a problem. What? I think I have mice. Okay, we're going to set up motion cameras. We're going to set up video. We're going to catch these mice on camera. And then if you're very lucky, there's a blurry video and look, there's a mouse. Cool. And it is cool. It is cool. I get that. And the pursuit, and like I said, I love watching these shows. But then they go, okay, well, yep, you got mice. Well, we're going to move on to somewhere in Connecticut to see if they have mice. I really think some follow-up needs to be done. And that's where a lot of stuff that I've dealt with has come into. A lot, and we're going to get into the fighting of spirits. This one's a little more personal, a little different than the others. First off, faith is always a good idea. And, faith both in yourself, faith in, your religious system, and faith in science. This is a tripod entity that will hold you up in this. Because the first and best way to fight spirits is to debunk them. This is you look at the events. So, what's actually going on? And then you look at the causes. Cause and effect kind of thing, sure. And you try to so a door's opening at night. Okay, mess with the door. Open the doors in the house. See if pressure is opening it. Is it an easy to open door? Is it a hard to open door? What are we looking at here? Things fall off. I like regular things. My favorite to investigate are, this happens almost all the time, especially at a fixed time. This is bread and butter, because then you can look at what's going on around it, and you might find that, well, a block down there's a train going by, and it doesn't shake the house, but it's enough to make a pen roll off and fall. Or, the guy who owns the semi-truck next door pulls in, and the lights go across. And that's why every night at this set of time you see something. Understanding things like the effects infrasound and high EMF, electromagnetic frequency, can have. Understanding basic visual effects, like what they call a fear box, where, narrow, slanted walls make us uneasy. This is why filmers use Dutch angles, where they tilt the camera slightly to make you think something's wrong or twisted or evil. That shortcut works because that's how our minds work. Humans love right angles. We love 90-degree angles to the point we call them right. It has nothing to do with left or right, and everything to do with correct. We love boxes. It's strange. We're the only organism on the planet that's fixated on creating boxes, which don't really exist in nature, but we love our boxes. So, if you have those angles not in place, if you have the lighting not in place, you're going to have Hi, sorry about the sudden jump cut in there. I personally had to debunk a noise I was hearing because I'm talking about this, and nothing untoward is going on. Amusing, but not untoward. So, like I said, humanity likes consistency, and we like patterns, and when things don't work right, we start to make patterns. We find faces everywhere. It's just part of how we're wired. So you get things like matrixing. You have to understand all this, and these are the first steps. The first steps of, of a standard investigation type thing where you're dealing with spooks. And yeah, I like to use derogatory terms about things that spook me. That's why I'll call lycanthropes the terminally furry. I'll, oi fang face to your vampiric type things. The sulfur boys to, them. and spooks and things. It's part of how I deal with not being afraid. I steal some of the power back through humor. But when you're okay, you've gone through, you've debunked whatever is going on, and you can't find a reason. This is where the toys really do come out. This is where you want your thermometers, you want your EMF detectors, things like this. Not necessarily as much for the entity tracking as they get produced, although they're useful. They make checking for things like cold drafts. It's cold in this room. Well, after dark, it gets colder, and you have no insulation around your window. You're going to feel a cold draft, things like that. Once you get past, then there's the standard. I'm going to record what happens. If people put up a camera, they may use any number of tools, EMF detectors. Again, looking for anomalous electromagnetic fields that shouldn't be there, especially moving, because these things put out energy. Thermometers, because they absorb energy to put it back out. A lot of times it's that heat to electricity conversion. Fascinating process. And then they'll try through various devices to talk to them. So, your spirit boxes, your EVP recordings, all, just straight up hearing somebody talk back from an empty room, or other interactions, and we can jump to that. And then things, if they're hunting and they're trying, because they're hunting for evidence, they're hunting for, let's see, it's not, I'm not sure they're really hunting for evidence as much as proof. It's I believe in this, people have told me I'm crazy, I'm going to prove you wrong. It's out there for a lot of them. This isn't all of them. I love ghost hunters. They're great people, and the people do it. But they gotta be smart about it. And the problem is, I've encountered a lot of people who are amateurish about it, and then they get in trouble. Now, okay, so something's going on, you're talking to a EA. Here's the problem. We're starting to get into things like the Constantine clause. The Constantine clause is, if you can see them, they can see you. The more you look at them, the more they look at you. And this happens around many times any sense of predator. It's a very predatory mindset. It's an intercessionist mindset. So, for example, if you stare at a cop, that cop's going to come over and say, what's up? If you, again, stare too hard at just about anybody, not only, it's funny, most people feel they're being stared at, but they will come investigate. Well, it goes both ways. You're dealing with something that is apparently sentient. Whether, I have to put a powerful caveat in the, I'm not always sure. Actually, I'm mostly not sure. I mostly don't believe things are what they may claim to be. And that's a powerful and important point. Because for some reason, people don't get the idea that entities could lie. And they could appear and say, I'm your great Aunt Mildred, or I'm your, or I'm whoever you're looking for, whatever you want to hear. Because, remember, there is a power exchange through this observational effect. So the more you talk to it, the more beefy it gets. It's a very interesting exchange. Now, what can they do? Now, under normal circumstances, most spirits have about a 5-pound weight limit. This is very rough, but this is just to give you an idea. Now, what can be done with a 5-pound weight limit is impressive. uh, that a brick could be thrown. You know what I'm saying? Small stones can be thrown with accuracy. Doors can be opened. People can be shoved at balance points. Have you ever noticed when people hear I felt shoved? Very rarely does the ghost shove them uh, in the middle of the room. No, they wait till they're on the stairs because it's most effective. Um, and again, the other thing is some of that is mental backtracking, But I have seen things lifted. I had a bag lifted right off my leg and the strap undone while I was standing there on one case. But that was an augmented case, and I want to talk about that. Uh, Somewhere in the realm, in the space between a your standard sentient case, there's a ghost running through the house, which may or may not be, shadow people, and something inhuman. You you get what's augmented. Augmented things happen when the environment is geared towards empowering certain types of entity. This is where you're going to have a place is dark, it's dirty, it's cluttered, it's let's see, obviously iconography. So if the guy whose house is really dark all the time has you know really cool looking scary posters, demonic images, things like that. Uh, Gargoyles can be hit or miss depending on the gargoyle, uh, because there's a protective element there. But we're moving past that for a second, mythologically. But the how it is can really affect, and part of it is it affects the mind of the person. You know, bright, clean places don't usually attract, especially inhumans, or empower things. Now, people will immediately go, but hospitals are, bright and sterile as a rule. I mean, they're the extreme opposite, and they are, but the emotional uh, miasma around a hospital is, I mean, it's so heavy. You got to think, just excluding the birth ward, and let's be honest, the maternity ward has its tragic side too. But just about everywhere else, people are sick, people are dying, or they have died. So hospitals are incredibly laden with human suffering, and it tends to pool there a bit, uh, so they can get past the thing. But I think there's a level of invitation, either accidental or a purpose, that can happen. And that's why I get really uneasy in certain kinds of situations. Because, if you build it, they will come. You make any place suitably spooky enough, uh, things will eventually kind of move in. Just like you leave a place dirty enough, infestations happen. This is just a part of the flora and fauna of the preternatural or the supernatural. The beyond the normal still has, you know, biological function, not just sentience, but you'll get little creepy things, things like darters that aren't repeaters, and they're not spirits, and they're not technically. Well, I mean, they're inhuman, but they're not, the sulfur crowd. But you'll see little black motions that all they do is run around. They're like the ghost equivalent of mice, but they're not mice. They're not tangible. You can't just put out a little trap and, oh look, I got a darter. Uh, the the dealing with it is different. Now, so how do we fight ghosts? It can be done. Sentient entities can be driven from a place depending on the type and how much you are packing. Um, a lot of systems are about where energy is put. I know some people who are so devoutly disbelieving. I have a couple people I could walk into a place, and as long as that person is there, nothing will ever go bump. And it used to baffle me. It really used to baffle me as a mechanic because you take them away, and within minutes the place is hopping again. Stuff's and recordable phenomena. Put them back in, everything shuts down. Um, Sometimes there are people of tremendous faith, which means essentially they are channeling from a literal higher power, and little powers aren't going to mess with that. Or there are people who have devoted their lives so hard to scientific belief that their disbelief is almost a form of casting. It's fascinating to see, and it's really weird to see when in the few situations where that breaks, and then their world comes crashing down. It's weird, and it's like some things see that as a challenge. It's really weird. So okay, how do you fight it? There are concepts when you're dealing with something supernatural of that can cleaning up, lighting, making sure a place is brightly lit. You want it to be uncomfortable for something spooky. So basically, you want to make an unhaunted house in delivery. Clean, lived in, chill music playing, not creepy, nothing distorting, nothing overtly saccharine, mellow music, baked goods. These are, a type of casting that everybody has ever done to make the energy of a place feel better. You know, you're having a bad day, baked goods. You feel better before you eat them because the process puts you in a better mindset. The smells put you in a better mindset. Your mindset shapes your environment. So that's a big start. Now they'll oppose it, especially if you're in a sentient. Uh, Established threshold is very important. This is my territory. This is my space. It's not theirs. They can get out. They aren't welcome here. They aren't, and they're what you end up doing is taking your personal threshold, the part that keeps things from riding you like a horse, and pushing out to affect your entire space. There are certain what you look for when you're trying to figure out what works in that sort of thing is if every single folklore cites something as working, it usually does. Um, so this is where like the salt thing. Nothing is hurt by spreading some salt around. Very often I found that has effects. So the salt will do. There, it isn't something you have to believe in. It's a mechanical process of some sort. Even if I don't understand it, it grounds things out. So that's why salt tends to drive stuff out. Again, our old buddy cold iron comes back. Cold iron has a lot of associations to the point where cold iron supposedly can contact ghosts. Meaning a cold iron ring would let you punch a ghost. Um, Not one I have tried because usually just force of faith and will lock things down. Now, like I said, the one of the most active ones I walked into had to be the people who bought Indian artifice. They bought these Native American uh, vases and statuary. It was right around Halloween, and they thought it was Cocopelli, but it was not Cocopelli. And they, it was weird because I've come into a lot of places, and I was visiting this place in San Pierre, Indiana, at the request of a buddy who got the request from their owners to see if I could help figure out what's going on. And the I said normally I walk in, I meet them, and I look around the living room. I'm like, normally I like to get a feel for the house, but can I ask you a question before anything starts? Sure, they were very nice people. Why do you have a death altar in your living room? And they looked at me. They had taken Native American vases that had been acquired through what I understand to be dubious means because they looked cool and no one would miss them, and put them angled around a ceramic skull that was full of candles. So it was literally a flaming skull in the center of their room in an elevated situation. And they're like, we have dark things running through our house and noises at night and doors. And to their credit, they absolutely did. Because I walked in there and things literally look, I'm like, before I come in and I do this, can we send the kids over? And the kids were out of the house because they didn't need to see anything that was. And I'm walking around the house and I'm getting mad because it was annoying. Things were messing with folks. They were messing with kids and all these shouts. I'm like, okay, so first thing, let's get rid of but it's Halloween. Yeah, well, you have problems. And as soon as I say that, the doors start slamming themselves, kind of like a cartoon. And of course, I walk in. I'm like, don't you guys stop that. I'm yelling at them like an angry, oddly very parental. I was annoyed. I come walking in, I salt bunch, and the door stop slamming. I turn on the lights and I examine the doors. There's no mechanics. Of course, there's no mechanics. And things are moving and shaking and all the stuff. And I'm like, no. And I go in and I feel the doors, you can feel yourself. You watch, turn around, the doors are a little shadow, and turn on the light, nothing there, turn the light back off, go off. So put a line of salt. Everything's locked down in the rooms now. I'm like, okay, here's what you're going to do. First off, you got to get somebody of religious background because they're messing with this kid for reasons. I'm not going to get into details because you don't need to know the details. It's none of your business. But salt, you have to take your house back. You have to tell them to get out and just treat them like supernatural squatters. There was nothing big D. It was just annoying and crowded in there. And get rid of the death altar. Probably, if possible, give the vases back, asking for, apologizing. At bare minimum, politeness needs to be, incurred. Because I will tell you, Kokopelli holds a flute, not a spear. But and at the time there was a lot of recreational drug use, a lot of overlaid. There was a lot of we want to well-meaning, inviting things in because it made them feel special, and I counter that a lot. People will invite things in and it makes them feel special. So for an internal kind of thing, it's basically an eviction. You need to make the place yours, evict the squatters, uh, calling in the Catholics to help you evict them is essentially the idea of you're calling somebody who is a direct tie formally to a very high power, and that's like calling the cops. It's a very simple overlay. It's not dramatic. That's for internal, like residential things. Again, I'm not talking big. Evicting the big D's, you need help. You need help from spiritual leaders. You may get help from other spiritual situations. But that borders on the sets of stories I don't tell because I don't encourage people to stupidity. So, that's that. External is an entirely different thing. When stuff is haunting outside, you don't have threshold to work with, so the rules are very different. Um, and usually they're less human seeming. A lot of it's just I treat it like there's a big dog in the neighborhood. Okay, if you know there's a big mean dog, like a junkyard style dog, and I love dogs, don't get me wrong, but you know what I'm talking about. I like to know where the dog is because I avoid it. You know, the chances of anyone watching this being trained, inclined, or equipped for that is very unlikely. So it's the best idea with that is just to, there's a big dog on that car, don't go there. If you have to, again, never hurts to ask for help. Pray, don't do things alone. Don't be stupid. Very, very often bad things happen to people around a haunting that are provoked by them being stupid. It hit me. Well, did you run in the dark into a wall? Well, you got scared and you ran. You got scared and you panicked and something dumb happened. So it made you panic worse. You get a gestalt of stupidity. This is something you don't want to get tangled in. Because dark places, while exciting, make us do stupid things. So don't do that. Now I understand some people are going to go out and look into this stuff. I don't ever really suggest it. I think there needs to be a logic here. Like I said, there's threshold. There is threshold. Threshold. This is territory. My house is my territory. You people. The Bachelor's Grove Cemetery is an old cemetery, and there are a lot of places that are old and dark, and things live there. It's we have to sometimes as humans, as people, look past our own arrogance on this and go, I was attacked by a shark. What were you doing? Well, I was obviously diving in shark-infested waters, and I was taking pictures and messing with them. That's the idea of if somebody came in my house uninvited, started, messing with me, maybe taking my food, I'd attack them too. That's a natural response. When you start looking at the supernatural through a natural lens, you start to realize this is our territory. They need to stay out of that. Part and parcel is you really shouldn't go digging into other people's territory without a good reason. And if you believe that the ghosts are sentient afterlife people who are trapped potentially in their misery and you don't know how to help them, you shouldn't go out poking them to get them to perform tricks for you. Not a popular opinion, and I accept that, but really, imagine, you wouldn't go to jail and take a stick and poke the prisoner, would you? Dance for me. Do something. Look, you're trapped. That's rude. So I think the best way to deal with a lot of that stuff is don't be a dick. And I know this is a little different, and that's a very different approach than a lot of people have. But if they're not being a dick, to you, don't mess with them. If they are, figure out why. A lot of times, like I said, it's an item. So you go back, figure out sort of a patient zero. Oh, nothing started till I bought this candelabra. I bought this, mirror. I went to a yard sale. I got this item. A buddy of mine got a dagger real cheap. And then a bunch of things happened, and I'm like, wow, it all started the day after you got the dagger, huh? And we disposed of the dagger, and it all stopped. Glory be. Logic and, dare I say, manners. And this again ties back into when I was talking about the Fae. You don't mess with stuff, and you don't be a dick. Now, if you have to fight something, you fight it fair, you fight it open, and you do the job. But poking stuff, inviting stuff, going places that you shouldn't. Okay, another metaphor. When you go on the internet, you use some type of virus block, right? I mean, you don't just randomly scroll different things and not have, a firewall and protections. You don't go around shady neighborhoods or dangerous places yelling out your address. Or waving cash around. Because you're applying logic, you're applying exceptionally basic situational and tactical awareness. That overlaps perfectly with dealing with ghosts and whatever. So, I'm going to do one more video, guys, and I know this one wasn't as combative as folks probably want, but that's okay. The next one will be all about combatives. I'm going to do a sort of capstone video where I talk about, okay, if you're being stupid and you are monster hunting, because it may be necessary, but understand, you are taking a stupid action. That's sort of like, the old days when, packs of wolves would overwhelm areas or mountain lions would take people and they'd have to go out and get the mountain lion. Not very popular, but, it's still fundamentally you're walking into a dangerous situation. If we're going to do that, for the prospective Von Helsings out there, I will do one more video and I will focus entirely on my opinion on equipment and actual combative tactics. This is going from the defensive side to the offensive side. If you've enjoyed these videos, please like, share, subscribe. These videos are all made possible by my patrons, like Steve Agosto, Cindy Kep, and my supporters like Steve Clausen and John Miner of Swackhammer Metals. I will, of course, reference them and like them in the videos to come. I may wait till after Halloween to do my defense one, just because I don't necessarily want to encourage stupidity. My tactics, video, because stupidity is best unencouraged, and maybe after. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. If not, like, share, subscribe, give me the comment anyway. Be good to yourselves, be smart out there. And as always, support your local swordmaster.